So I'm trying to manage a 1 acre hop yard organically. It is the fall of 2017. I'm doing some fertilizing. I'm spreading some compost on my hops. Here's how much I used and what my system was to deliver it and where I think it can be improved. So this is my hop yard right behind me, and I have 200-foot rows. My nomenclature is lanes is where you drive down. Rows are the rows of hops themselves, the actual dirt that you see here. The lanes are in between that you would drive down. And then bays are every 50 feet. I have another row of poles. So we have lanes, rows, and bays. So I have 4 bays, which means it's 200 feet long. I have 16 rows. That's like 3,200 linear feet of hops that I wanted to nourish. So what I did this fall, I've been making compost out of spent brewer's grain and wood chips. About 3-part wood chips to 1 part brewer's grain. And with the brewer's grain, it's, should I get into all this? Yeah, why not? So with the brewer's grain, it's really wet and compact and full of nitrogen because you've taken all the starch out of it, all the carbohydrate when you are making the beer. So you're left with this wet, oxygen deprived, potentially growing into anaerobic pile of slop. And you want to add air to it, and you want to add some coarse texture. So with wood chips, you're bringing in a carbon source, and that carbon source is fusing with the nitrogen. It's coarse, so it's adding air, and then you're turning it with the mini excavator or the tractor, and that's introducing oxygen, and then you have compost after a while. I'm sure it's more scientific than that, but not in this video, it's not. So I'm spreading my compost on all of my 200-foot rows. I'm doing about 3 inches thick by 2 feet wide by the 200-foot long. That gives me about 3.7 cubic yards per row, equaling about, I think it's 60 or 70 cubic yards if you times that by 16. So 70 cubic yards of compost shoveled out by hand. Here's how I got it onto the hops. I'm doing it to fertilize the hops instead of using any chemical fertilizer. I have this compost readily available to me. I have a lot of it, so I figured why not use it on the hops to grow the hops. We're trying to manage it organically. Whew, getting it there was a process. So getting the compost on the hops, I had a manure spreader, and I tried that. And with the manure spreader, I would put the compost in the manure spreader. It would do its flippy thing, and then it would spray it backwards. Check this out, where it only sprays it directly behind where you can drive with the manure spreader. And I don't want to drive crossways across my bays here, across the rows, because I don't want to miss and compact any of the hops. They're not as perfectly spaced for my tractor, so I kind of have to drive down the lanes. But with driving down the lanes, I can't drive over the hops because there's poles there. I don't get any compost on the hops themselves, and if the compost is not going directly onto the plant, it's really not doing any good. So the manure spreader is out, and that's what I have for equipment. So then my other options were pick it up with the tractor bucket and then try to drive it in and come in at an angle and kind of feather drop it. But I would have had to do 100 million trips with the tractor. Granted, I'd be using a machine, but I'd be using a ton of diesel, a ton of time, and because our rows are only 12 feet wide and our tractor is longer than 12 feet, I can't fit the tractor perfectly perpendicular to the hop rows themselves. So there's no way I could efficiently get just compost on just the hops. So what I ended up doing is Kate and I filled up my dump trailer and attached the dump trailer to the back of the tractor, and we would stand in the dump trailer and shovel off shovelfuls of compost directly onto the hops, and we just used the rate of when you can't see grass anymore, that's enough compost. And it ended up being about 3 inches of compost would give us a nice cover and snuff out all the weeds. The hops are all dormant and in there just, you know, in roots below the surface. So we're just covering up all the grass and anything weeds and stuff that we had left by doing not a great job of de-weeding it in the past, whatever. Yeah, we got a good application of compost in it. It used pretty much all the compost that I had made to date. Now I get to start making more of it, and it's good because I needed that space back. Yeah, so that's how we got compost onto our hops. So some things for how I might better this system in the future. I've gotten some suggestions now of maybe you could use a grain a gravity wagon, a grain wagon for pushing this stuff out. Well, grain is usually a little bit more fluffy and light, and you can turn it with an auger a lot easier. My compost, since my property is so wet, the bottom of the compost piles get a little soggy, or if it rains and the compost is a little damp, it gets sticky and it'll stick to the trailer, or if it's in something like a grain bin, it'll start to bridge over the top of where the auger might be to shoot the stuff out to the side. So it would just get all gunked up in there, and you'd spend your time wrestling with the compost. I don't think something like you know, a salt spreader or a feed gravity wagon is going to work for this application. I'm sure there may be something out there, but I don't know what it is right now. So my manure spreader didn't work. So bringing all this stuff out by hand took us a little bit less than a week. We were super tired. It was not an old man's task. It was for the young at heart, young and foolish. Other solutions, I'm not entirely sure. Do I think something like this is needed in the market? Because not only am I trying to spread compost on my hops, which might be more doable if you had a machine, if you wanted to try this at a larger scale, but also as permaculture grows as an ethos, and I know it's been around forever, but as more people are trying to apply it, having that where you can manage your orchards organically, where you spray compost underneath your orchard trees, or if you wanted to put it in whatever row crops, if you're in grapes and you're driving down the aisles and you want to spread it to the grapes, how do other people get compost onto their plants when they have poles or obstacles where they can't drive directly over the plants? So that's my question for this. So now you know what I did this year, what my feelings are, roughly how long it took, how much compost I used, and you have my homework is, if you guys find a better solution, I am all ears. Leave it in the comment section below. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and until next time, I will see you out in the field.